What does a cat, a rat, a dog, and an infant have in common? Well, you may be wondering, but they all were helpful in studying behavior and learning. Here's a little bit about behaviorism theories. Behaviorism focuses on behavior over thinking and observable behavior. The focus is on teaching, where a teacher would break down a bigger skill into smaller, more manageable skills, check students' work regularly, provide feedback, encouragement, reinforcement. This is more of a teacher-centered instruction, but it doesn't have to be. On the slide, you will see a monkey. So I think of this as monkey see, monkey do. Here is a summary of discoveries by psychologists in this area. John B. Watson was the founder of behaviorism, and he became famous for his Little Albert study on an infant, where he discovered a philosophy that any person could be trained to perform any task with the right conditioning. Pavlov became famous for his study with a dog, food, and a bell, which was called classical conditioning, where positive and negative reinforcement impact learning. E.L. Thorndike was famous for his study on a cat escaping a box, where he discovered that after the cat escaped, it did it faster the next time, and he called it connectionism. After the initial connection response, time is increased to learning.
And then B.F. Skinner is recognized for operant conditioning. He had the famous experiment with the rats, food lover. B.F. Skinner is famous for operant conditioning. It is a famous experiment where he had rats press a lever. When they pressed a lever, they were rewarded with food. He wanted to shape their learning by giving them rewards for certain behaviors. So eventually he only rewarded the really hard lever presses with food, which extinct the weaker lever presses. Robert Gagne is famous for his conditions of learning. He has a number of learning outcomes: intellectual skills, cognitive strategies, verbal information, motor skills, and attitudes. He believes that different instruction is required for all different levels of learning outcome. And finally, Edward Tolman. He is famous for Gestalt's theory, which is the study of how people see and understand the relation of the whole to the parts that make it up. Basically, what this breaks down to is how memories are stored. When a person remembers something, when they go back in their mind to retrieve it, they reconstruct the memory in a more organized manner than it was originally presented. So our theory of classical conditioning, reinforcement is the main idea here, and reinforcement aims to increase the behavior. So an example of positive reinforcement would be a teacher praising a student for doing the homework. Once the student perceives that they will be rewarded, they'll increase the behavior. Negative reinforcement is not punishment. This is a common misconception. Reinforcement always aims to increase the behavior. So with negative reinforcement, an example is a student can go out to recess after finishing their reading. So you're increasing the behavior of students doing their work by giving them the by giving them the reinforcement of going outside. Extinction, which I talked about earlier, is a weakened response.
John B. Watson was known as the founder of behaviorism, or also the father of behaviorism. He was inspired by Pavlov's experiments, and only behavior should be studied because internal states are too subjective. So what he was saying, it was hard to see what really was happening in the mind, which you would know by watching the behavior. He believed that any person could be trained to perform any task with the right conditioning.
And just as a note, behaviorists are really into only recording what they can see and perceive.
The connectionism theory, learning is a trial and error process, which I think every teacher knows. One learns by making a response, receiving reinforcements if it is correct, and then makes a connection. The connectionism theory was discovered by the hungry cat experiment that we talked about before. Cats were placed in a box. The goal was for them to try to get out. At their first attempts were random and very time-consuming, but after they figured out how to get out of the box, they got there much faster. B.F. Skinner focuses on operant conditioning, manipulating variables in an effort to identify, predict, and control behavior. This focuses on reinforcement. Reinforcement is not consistent over time. So with a random reinforcement philosophy, then the student would be more apt to repeat the behavior, not knowing if they would be rewarded afterwards or not, so creating a skill. An example here is a slot machine. A person pulls the handle on the slot machine over and over, trying to win that big jackpot. Do they win every time? They actually win very few times, but they still keep pulling that handle because they know they're going to win at some point in time. Extinction is when the reinforcement is then no longer there, and it could possibly change the behavior. Punishment is not an effective way of eliminating behavior. Eliminating the reinforcement is more effective in changing behavior. Here is a beautiful graph to show you the positive and negative reinforcement and some examples of how it could change behavior based on reinforcement and punishment.
Okay, and here's some classroom applications for behaviorism. The first one with classical conditioning, positive and negative reinforcement. This one's pretty straightforward. If you want your students to continue doing a specific behavior, you positively reinforce them for it. So in my classroom, when students are quiet, I continuously praise them for being quiet and having an effective learning environment. Connectionism. Once a connection is made, the next time response time is much faster. And I think this is something we all see in our classroom on a daily basis. The first couple of weeks are difficult because you're teaching students your expectations and how to complete your work properly. I had one student who, when she was making annotations, the first time we did it, it took her probably twice as long as everyone else, and the next time it really only took her a couple of minutes.
Operant conditioning, to shape learning by rewarding desired behavior. So you could use positive reinforcement here, or prizes, or stickers, or a chart board. Different teachers handle this in all different ways. So rewarding desired behavior so that it repeats. Conditions for learning. Differentiated instruction is required for different learning outcomes. So using various presentation styles and assessment types to relate to your students and their desired type of learning. If they see it in different ways, they're more apt to absorb it and create the learned behavior that you desire.
And Gestalt theory, the main thing with this is it's important for us as teachers to understand how students store their memories and information. So as we said earlier, when students store their memories and they go back to pull them out, it is much more uniform and organized than it was originally presented.
Behaviorism theory limitations. People are not programmed animals that respond to stimuli. Not all learning can be translated to observable behavior. A lot of it does just happen in the mind. It's an one-dimensional approach to learning. It does not account for free will and internal influences such as mood, thoughts, and feelings. It also does not account for previous knowledge. So going further, how are you already using behaviorism in the way you teach today? What are some positive reinforcements you could create for your students? When might behaviorism not be the best theory to apply to achieve learning objectives?
And finally, this is our reference page. We'd like you to note two books that we had. The first one is the Instructional Design Knowledge Base. This was a really good reference for us because it's very straightforward when it explains all the different theories, and it actually explains exactly how they relate to teaching in the classroom, which is difficult to find. And the second one is Theories of Learning and Educational Psychology. This is at the bottom of our reference list. And this is a psychology book that is very easy to read if you don't know a lot about psychology. So both of these books do an awesome job about breaking down these more complex ideas and theories into kind of everyday understanding and knowledge.